Before the wedding, Daniel looked at me with a mix of hesitation and hope. "Can you give me a month?" he asked. He wanted to try rekindling his relationship with his ex-girlfriend. If he succeeded, it would prove they were meant to be. If he failed, he promised to return, marry me, and leave her in the past forever. I didn't argue. Instead, I smiled faintly and replied sincerely, "Go ahead, give it a try. After all, life shouldn't have regrets, right?" That night, he drove off, looking relieved, almost happy. Meanwhile, I quietly packed my belongings and called home. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, "I'm not getting married. I'm coming home to help you with the family business." I could feel my mother's excitement through the phone. "Finally, your dad and I always said that man wasn't reliable. 7 years of dating, and he still couldn't commit." She didn't wait for me to reply. "Perfect timing. Our art studio in Chicago needs someone to settle the accounts. I'll arrange everything for you." "Sure," I said, cutting the conversation short. Chicago sounded ideal, far enough to leave everything, especially him, behind. As I stood amidst the scattered wedding souvenirs, all I felt was a quiet, bitter amusement. 7 years with Daniel Rhodes. 7 years of believing we had a future. I stood by his side through the toughest years of his life, believing that all the sacrifices would eventually pay off. But what I thought was the start of our happily ever after turned out to be nothing more than a fragile dream. I noticed a message from my mother. "The flight is booked for a week from now. You've been in Washington for so many years. Use this time to say goodbye." I decided to do just that. While Daniel was away, I roamed the city I had called home for so long. I had dinner with friends, revisited old haunts, and slowly said my farewells to Washington. Daniel's calls came like clockwork every day. "Lily, what are you up to? I miss you." "Nothing much," I replied, my voice steady. "Just packing up at home." I told him the truth. He didn't ask any more questions, but he kept calling to share where he was and what he was doing. Daniel mentioned how nervous he was about meeting Abigail after all these years. It struck me as odd. This habit of ours. Over the years, we have grown accustomed to sharing everything. Whenever he traveled for work, it was natural for us to say we missed each other and chat about the day's events. Now, even as he prepared to see Abigail, he still called me to report. Habit, I realized, is a particularly terrible thing. I remained silent for a while. "Are you angry? Why aren't you saying anything?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "No," I said softly, the words bitter on my tongue. "I wish you the best." Even I wasn't sure how I managed to say it. Daniel was silent for a moment too. Then, after what felt like forever, he said quietly, "I'll come back as soon as possible. No matter what the result is, I love you." I wanted to believe him. I might have even believed him for a fleeting second. But it didn't matter anymore. Because this time, I was ready to let go. 3 days later, Daniel returned. I hadn't expected him to come back so soon. But what shocked me more was that standing next to him was Abigail. I still remember the first time I met Abigail. Back then, I had felt a pang of envy. She was the kind of girl who wasn't afraid to break the rules. A little wild, yet undeniably magnetic. Stunningly beautiful. She exuded confidence and flair. The air between us was tense, laden with unspoken history. The kind of natural charisma Abigail possessed was something I could never emulate, shaped as I was by years of discipline and propriety. She had a tattoo curling elegantly along the side of her neck, her sunglasses perched atop her head, and her loose curls cascading over her shoulders. "Lily, long time no see," she greeted me, her voice familiar, but carrying an undertone of weariness. It struck me as strange.